Every one of the roughly 37 trillion cells in your body is doing something no rock, no ocean, and no star has ever managed on its own. It is copying itself. Right now, somewhere in your body, a cell is dividing, passing on a set of instructions that has never once been fully interrupted since it first appeared. Not once. Not in over 3.5 billion years. That number is not a rounding error. In 2017, geologists studying rock in Quebec's Neuve-Wajiddick greenstone belt found microscopic tube and filament structures inside iron-rich rock, dated to between 3.77 and 4.28 billion years old. Earth itself is only about 4.5 billion years old. Life may have started almost as soon as the planet had cooled enough to allow it. The leading theory, backed by researchers at University College London, points to hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, cracks in the Earth's crust leaking warm, mineral-rich water, providing both the energy and the chemical gradients needed to drive the first self-sustaining chemical reactions. This changes what you actually are. You are not really a new thing. You are the current chapter of a chemical reaction that has been running, without stopping, for 3/4 of the age of the planet. Here is what the next several minutes will trace: a straight, unbroken line from a single self-copying molecule in the dark, all the way to a mammal capable of building telescopes to search for that same process happening on other worlds. The earliest solid fossil evidence of life comes from stromatolites, layered mounds built by colonies of microbes, found in the Dresser Formation in the Pilbara region of Western Australia and dated to about 3.48 billion years old. For roughly a billion years after that, life stayed almost entirely single-celled and simple. Then, around 2.4 billion years ago, a group of microbes called cyanobacteria began doing something that would change the entire planet, converting sunlight into energy and releasing oxygen as a waste product. Geologists call the result the Great Oxidation Event. Oxygen, to most of the microbial life on Earth at that time, was toxic. It was very likely the first mass extinction in Earth's history, caused entirely by microorganisms polluting their own atmosphere. But here is where it gets stranger. Oxygen didn't just nearly wipe life out. It set up the conditions for the single most important merger in the history of biology. In 1967, biologist Lynn Margulis published a paper, rejected by more than a dozen journals before finally being accepted, proposing that mitochondria, the oxygen-processing structures inside your cells, were once free-living bacteria. Roughly 1 to 2 billion years ago, one primitive cell engulfed another instead of digesting it, and the two began working as one. That merger is called endosymbiosis, and it is now supported by strong genetic evidence. Mitochondria still carry their own small loop of DNA, separate from yours, a leftover signature of their bacterial past. Every complex cell in your body is, at its core, a partnership between at least two different ancient organisms. That partnership is what made complexity possible at all. Bacteria alone never evolved into anything bigger than a bacterium. But cells with mitochondria had enough spare energy to afford something no purely bacterial cell could: specialization. Around 1.6 billion years ago, fossils called Bangiomorpha pubescens, found in rock in Arctic Canada, show some of the earliest clear evidence of multicellular life, with cells organized into distinct structures instead of living as loose, identical colonies. For most of the next billion years, multicellular life stayed simple, soft, and mostly invisible in the fossil record. Then, between about 635 and 541 million years ago, something changed. At Mistaken Point in Newfoundland, paleontologists have mapped fossil beds covered in strange, flattened, quilted organisms called the Ediacaran biota. Creatures like Dickinsonia, some over a meter long, don't clearly match any modern animal group. They were among the first large, complex organisms to leave a fossil record at all. Then, around 541 million years ago, evolution seems to hit the accelerator. Paleontologist Charles Walcott, in 1909, stumbled onto a rock formation in the Canadian Rockies called the Burgess Shale, preserving an explosion of animal body types in extraordinary detail: hard shells, jointed legs, compound eyes, and predators like Anomalocaris, a meter-long creature with grasping claws and a circular, tooth-lined mouth. In the space of roughly 20 million years, a blink of an eye at geological scale, nearly every major animal body plan alive today appears in the fossil record for the first time. Scientists still don't fully agree on why the Cambrian explosion happened so fast. For the next 100 million years, all of this complexity stayed in the water. Then, in 2004, paleontologist Neil Shubin and his team, digging on Ellesmere Island in the Canadian Arctic, found something they had specifically gone looking for, a fossil fish with a flat head, a neck, and wrist bones, dated to about 375 million years old. They named it Tiktaalik rosii. It had gills and scales like a fish, but it also had the bone structure to prop itself up and possibly move across mudflats. It is one of the clearest transitional fossils ever found, sitting almost exactly at the boundary between fish and the first four-limbed animals to test the land. Once life left the water, it diversified fast, amphibians, then reptiles, then, starting around 230 million years ago, the dinosaurs, which would go on to dominate almost every land ecosystem on Earth for roughly 165 million years. That dominance ended abruptly. In 1980, physicist Luis Alvarez and his son, geologist Walter Alvarez, proposed that a layer of iridium-rich clay found worldwide at the boundary marking the dinosaurs' disappearance came from an asteroid impact. In 1991, geologists confirmed the crater, Chicxulub, buried off the coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, about 66 million years old and roughly 150 kilometers across. Within a geological instant, the dinosaurs that weren't birds were gone. Mammals had existed alongside dinosaurs for well over 100 million years, mostly small, nocturnal, and easy to overlook. With the dinosaurs gone, they diversified explosively. Primates appear in the fossil record within a few million years of the extinction, and the lineage that eventually leads to you splits from the ancestors of chimpanzees somewhere between 6 and 7 million years ago, based on genetic divergence studies. Then, in 2017, researchers led by Jean-Jacques Hublin published fossils from Jebel Irhoud, Morocco, pushing back the earliest known Homo sapiens remains to roughly 300,000 years old, 100,000 years earlier than previously confirmed. So here's where the line comes back around. Right now, in labs around the world, that same 3.5 billion-year chemical project is studying itself. In 2020, DeepMind's AlphaFold system solved a problem that had stumped biologists for 50 years, predicting the three-dimensional shape of proteins from their genetic sequence with startling accuracy, work that earned its creators a share of the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. In 2010, the J. Craig Venter Institute built the first cell with a fully synthetic genome. And space agencies are now designing missions to Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus, specifically to check their subsurface oceans for the same kind of chemistry that may have started all of this, on this planet, 3.5 billion years ago. You are not separate from that first reaction at the vent. You are what it became when it had 37 trillion cells, a nervous system, and just enough curiosity to start asking where it came from.